We're like a little bit of exercise in this church. You come to church, you get exercise too. Please don't make me stand here all on my own. And underneath the black cloth is a craft for the kids. Can I just encourage kids? There is a craft. Under the black cloth there's a craft. I said, you still feel a bit far away, to be honest. But anyway, I'll let you off. Just a couple of things. Our compassion children have written us lovely letters. So that means it's time for you to take these and reply to our compassion children. I will put these here. Please come and get them afterwards. There's envelopes, so free post envelopes. All you literally have to do is write a letter. You can even draw a little picture if you fancy. Send them something encouraging and send that to them. Next week, we're doing healing on the streets. We have this up, in and out pattern. This week is an up because we're worshipping God. An in is when we do stuff together, like have a meal together or a barbecue or go for a walk together. And out is when we kind of tell other people about Jesus. And we're trying to model that on Acts 2:42-47. And next week is an out week. So we'll be doing healing on the streets. We'll post on the WhatsApp group exactly when and how, and all that information will go out on our WhatsApp group and on social media and on our website. Okay. For those of you who don't know, I'm Liz, and Stuart and I are the senior pastors of this church. And this morning you've got me speaking. Sometimes it's Stuart, sometimes it's me, sometimes it's one of you. 2 weeks ago, it was Stuart. Stuart did he talked about Acts 2:42-47 in the up, in and out model that we use. So if you want to know more about that, go and listen to our podcast, which is imaginatively called Celebrate Church. And what else would it be called? And you can listen to Stuart speaking on that. You will have heard John. And if you went back 6 weeks, you will have heard somebody called Blake. Yes, Joe's next time. So, we're just breaking that pattern. I'm actually picking up a topic that Blake started 8 weeks ago, that John continued 6 weeks ago. And I really want to kind of press into this topic. I don't want to go over all the stuff that Blake said, but he talked about honour as a really important key to unlocking the resources that God wants us to have, the resources for what we call revival. In other words, when the church gets revived and people turn back to God. He talked about that honour was a key in that. And John picked up that theme 2 weeks ago, and it was really good. I don't actually think it's on our podcast because the recording of it wasn't amazing. If you want the recording, if you want to listen to it, I do have a recording, or John has a recording, and we'll happily send it to you. But I don't think it's made it this far as our podcast. But he really got us to think about the challenges that we have in honour. And I think as British people, we do have a lot of challenges in honour because we're very good at kind of lip service to honour and not very good at heart service to honour. In other words, we will honour people with our lips. The king's great, but he doesn't do this, that, and the other. The Prime Minister, no, I don't agree with him about da-da-da. And we dishonour all the time. You just have to look at social media to see how much we dishonour. And it just is horrendous, really, isn't it? The stuff that even as Christians we post on there. And I loved John's Putin illustration because I would never think of John sitting there at the television doing what he does. But it was very honest and very real. And we all have those reactions. It might not be to Putin, but we have reactions, don't we? When certain politicians come on the telly or certain people cross our path, when somebody cuts us up on the road, we have reactions, don't we, that are not very honouring, let's be honest, and we all have that. I want us to look today at kind of what honour means in relationships. I want to unpack that further. My brain has been a bit like John described his brain as being like popping candy. And I feel since Blake spoke, my brain has been a bit like popping candy. So I'm hoping that this doesn't kind of come across as a kind of splatter of popcorn that you kind of don't quite understand my thread. I hope it makes some sense. And I hope that it's an issue that we'll keep on kind of grappling together. Because if God has said to us, this is a key to unlock the resources that he wants us to have, then it's really important that we just don't go, well, that's nice. Yeah, we're really honouring, and kind of get on with it. Because I actually think the more I've thought about this, the more I've realised there is a lot of growth for us as a body to do, for me as an individual to do, so that we learn how to be honouring. Because I think we wear cultural glasses on this, and it's very hard for us to see how dishonouring we actually are. So I want us to read a Bible passage that I think will help with this, and that's Matthew 20, verses 1 to 16. If you haven't got a Bible with you, don't worry. I will read it out to you. For the kingdom of heaven is like the landowner who went out early one morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay the normal daily wage and sent them out to work. At 9 o'clock in the morning, he was passing through the marketplace and saw some people standing around doing nothing. So he hired them, telling them that he would pay whatever was right at the end of the day. So they went to work in the vineyard. At noon and again at 3 o'clock, he did the same thing. At 5 o'clock that afternoon, he was in town again and saw some more people standing around. He asked them, "Why haven't you been working today?" They replied, "No one hired us." The landowner told them, "Then go out and join the others in my vineyard." That evening, he told the foreman to call the workers in and pay them, beginning with the last workers first. When those hired at 5 were paid, each received a full day's wage. When those hired first came to get their pay, they assumed they would be receiving more. But they too were paid a day's wage. When they received their pay, they protested to the owner. "Those people worked only an hour, and yet you've paid them as much as you paid us who worked all day in the scorching heat." He answered one of them, "Friend, I haven't been unfair. Didn't you agree to work all day for the usual wage? Take your money and go. I wanted to pay this last worker the same as you. Is it against the law for me to do what I want with my money? Should you be jealous because I am kind to others? So those who are last now will be first then, and those who are first will be last." How many of us find that parable a bit irritating? Be honest. Yeah, it is a bit of an irritating parable. Who sits there and thinks, "Oh, that's absolutely fine. You know, the guy, it was his money. You know, he can do exactly what he likes with." I think for a lot of us, when you read this parable, I know as a child, it kind of really used to irritate me because that sense of injustice of like, hang on a minute, the people who worked an hour get the same as the people who worked, it seems wrong, doesn't it? Hang on a minute, that is not fair. I think this really exposes something to us that is key in us grasping what honour is about. Because we are very motivated by, it's not fair, that isn't right, that's not just, from our perspective. But the kingdom runs on a different, and this parable highlights that. It runs on a different value. It runs on a value of generosity. So the work at the employer, he was generous to the people who had been working all day because he paid them all a fair wage. It wasn't that he didn't pay a fair wage. I mean, the 9 o'clock people, or the people who he first hired, he had said, "This is how much I'm going to pay you." They'd said, "Yeah, we'll work for that." He was upfront with them. It was his choice as a generous employer to then give the people who had only worked an hour the same wage. It was his generosity that did that. I mean, he says to them, doesn't he, "Don't I have a right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous?" In other translations, that word generous is translated good. God's goodness and generosity is not about making us all the same. You know, he doesn't turn out cookie cutter people. It's about us being treated the way he wants us to with his generous heart. I think when Blake touched on this, when he told the story of Jonah that very first week, you know, Jonah gets really annoyed because God is compassionate to the people in Nineveh. The Ninevites, there we go. Because God was compassionate, and yet he actually quotes at God, "I knew you would be compassionate, caring, slow to anger." In other words, I knew you'd be like that, and because you were, I didn't want to do it. This parable exposes that in our hearts, doesn't it? Because we look at it and we go, hang on a minute, you shouldn't have paid the same amount. You shouldn't have been that generous to the people who only worked an hour. It's not fair. It annoys us. And I think it's that attitude that actually needs rewiring in us. It needs rewiring so that we begin to grasp what generosity and compassion actually look like. Because we all like it when we're the person who kind of gets the bonus, don't we? We all like it. You know, if we were the people who signed on at 5 o'clock and got the hours, worked an hour and got a whole day's wage, we would be like, "Oh, well done me." Yay me. But we don't celebrate it, the people who get that when we're the people who've worked all day. And so there's an attitude here that I feel we need to kind of grapple with. Before Stuart and I lived in Bradford, so this is a long time ago because we've been married 35 years this year, and we used to live in Sheffield, a city that we very much loved and enjoyed. And we moved here as a newly married couple, eager to join a church, eager to be part of a community, eager to serve in a church. And over our first couple of months, we visited lots of churches in Bradford. Every Sunday, I was working as a nurse back then, so I was working shifts, so I didn't get every Sunday off. But whenever I got a Sunday off, we would go to a church and we would visit. And we were shocked. Nearly every church we went to would say to us, oh, don't go to that church down the road because of this, that and the other. You know, you haven't been there. Oh, no, you don't want to go there. And they would tell us negative things about other churches. And we were like, oh, my word. We'd walk out and we would be like, well, we're not going there because they badmouth the church down the road. And it took us weeks to find somewhere that we did actually want to go to. Church after church spoke negatively about other churches. And it shocked us because we'd come from Sheffield, where we had been part of a Christian union as students, and we had an advisory board made up of a whole host of churches from charismatic like us to traditional and everything in between. And they all got on, and they all were on this advisory board, and they all enjoyed each other's company and were all really helpful to us as young Christians learning leadership for the first time. And here we were in a city where people badmouthed each other. And it was shocking. And I'm sure from each person's perspective, what they were doing was they were seeing us as a young couple and going, oh, we don't want you to kind of go somewhere erroneous, you know, somewhere that's going to lead you off the path. We want you to find somewhere that's a good home. But the impact was dishonour. That attitude, that sort of one-man-upmanship, that can easily creep in. And I've given you a very stark example of how it can creep in. But actually, how we speak about other people, be it a church, be it an individual, is really, really important. And I know it can be difficult to speak honouringly about people that we disagree with, but we have to do that. We absolutely have to do that. It's good for us to like being part of Celebrate Church. You know, I want you to be like, I love Celebrate and I love being here and I enjoy the way we worship and I enjoy the way we do things. But that's not an opportunity for us to dishonour how people do things differently. You know, it's okay. It's okay if people are traditional. It's okay if people love smells and bells. It's okay if people do church at 4 o'clock on an afternoon. It's okay if people want to meet on a Friday evening, because you know what? Jesus loves his church. All the expressions of it. Ephesians 5:25 says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. In other words, the whole of the church. He's not talking about Celebrate Church there. It wasn't just us he gave himself up for. It was the church, universal, all of it, in all its crazy variants all over the world. The people who sit quietly and love the smells and bells, the people who are noisier than we are, the people who have services that go on for 6 hours, the people who are in and out in half an hour. He loves it all. And if he chose to give himself up for her, then we cannot do any less in the way that we speak about other churches. Honouring the church is important. Honouring how we speak about others is important. To their face and how we speak behind their back can be two different things. And it is really important that does not sneak into us as Christians. Because this is all about an attitude of our heart, an attitude of how we see people and how we kind of view people. And I want to give us a couple of different ways for us to kind of think about people. I was listening to Brené Brown. Do you know who Brené Brown is? She's a researcher and she's written some really good books. And, well, she calls herself a researcher and a storyteller. And she's spent the last 2 decades researching things like courage, vulnerability, shame and empathy And what she does is she spends hours and hours interviewing people, literally thousands of people, talking to them about this. And then from that, she pulls out her sort of research and how she believes it, how she sees that those things, courage, vulnerability, shame, and empathy, impact people. And one of the things she found as she was researching is that people who believed other people were trying to do their best were more compassionate, more generous, and were generally happier in their life and had a more positive outlook. So, do you hear what she thought? That people who believe that other people are trying to do their best are more compassionate, more generous, generally happier, and have a more positive look on life. That sounds like something that we as Christians want to be, isn't it? And I look at Jesus and I realise that maybe this is the attitude that he had. You know, most of the time, this isn't, well, let me say something else before I kind of get into that. This isn't about hoping that people are doing their best, because hoping I'll get let down. You know, if I hope that, I'm trying to think of something, that Stuart will do the ironing this week, that might be a hope, but it will be dashed. It's not going to happen. He does lots of other things in our house, but not the ironing, can I just point out? He does all the cooking. He does all the cleaning. The only thing he doesn't do is the washing and ironing. That's me. I could hope that Stuart does the ironing. I could even hope that he does it well, but my hopes will be dashed. This is not about hoping that somebody does their best. This is about believing that they're trying to do their best. It's a different thing. So even when someone at church didn't speak to you, they were trying to do their best because maybe they were having a really hard day. You know, when somebody at the supermarket is rude, maybe they were trying to do their best. Maybe they were having a really hard day. You know, maybe when somebody cuts in front of you in the traffic queue, maybe they're trying to do their best. It's challenging, isn't it, when you start thinking about it? Maybe the politician you don't like is actually trying to do their best. So we should honour them. And I think Jesus models this for us. When the woman broke the alabaster jar of perfume, Jesus saw that she was trying to do her best. What the Pharisees saw was her sin. When Jesus saw the crowds, he's moved with compassion. When James and John wanted to call down fire on a Samaritan village for not welcoming him, Jesus stops them doing it. Time and again, we see Jesus responding with a heart of compassion, with a heart of honour. And I think it flowed from the understanding that with all our human limitations, people were trying to do their best. So stop for a moment and just think about the last person who irritated you or hurt you or annoyed you. Just think about that person for a minute. And then reframe what they were doing with the thought they were trying to do their best. And isn't that the kind of grace and compassion that God offers you? How can we not offer it to others? Bill Johnson said, who's a pastor at a church that we relate to in America, he said in a recent sermon that his dad used to say, you need to wash the feet of another person before you understand how they walk. That's quite a powerful image, isn't it? You need to wash the feet of another person before you understand how they work. In other words, it takes time and effort to really understand other people. In fact, even to understand you in this room, it would take a lot of time and a lot of effort. So maybe holding that thought that you're trying to do the best in whatever interaction I have with you, in whatever I see you doing in your life, would be a thought that would bring me to a place of honour. And if we don't want to have kind of superficial honour, then I believe that there are some things that stop us stepping into it. Because it's not easy to believe this, is it? It's not easy to believe that people are trying to do their best. But it's really important to do that. And I think What stops us from honour is actually shame. That the opposite of honour is not dishonour, it's shame. I can see you kind of frowning at me. I think shame stops us because it's not, dishonour is the action, shame is the feeling that stops us honouring well. So let me give you a definition of shame, and I'm going to use Brené's definition of shame because I think it's so good. Shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed, therefore unworthy of love, belonging, and connection. Shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love, belonging, and connection. And it's a universal human experience. Shame is, I feel unworthy, I feel bad, I'm not lovable, I'm not wanted. Guilt, it's different than guilt because guilt is I've done something bad. Guilt is I've stolen that, I've said a wrong word, I've had a wrong thought. But that's guilt. Shame is I'm bad, I'm feeling unworthy, I'm not wanted, I don't deserve connection. And shame actually cripples us. It stops us feeling love towards ourselves and it makes it really difficult for us to honour other people. Which is why it's the opposite of honour, because it disconnects us. It stops us being able to love others. Jesus was asked, what is the greatest command? He said, love the Lord your God as... And then he said, Matthew 22 verse 39, and the second is love your neighbour as yourself. Well, we can't love our neighbour as ourselves if we don't love ourselves. And most of us don't love ourselves very much. And if we don't love ourselves very much, it's very hard for us to love our neighbour. And if we don't love our neighbour, there's no way that we can honour our neighbour. So let me tell you a story. A few weeks ago, Stuart and I received a couple of texts that were not the kind of texts that as church leaders you want to receive. I felt like I'm not good enough. I can't do this. But that was my initial thought, was like, oh, no, I'm not good enough. I'm not, I can't do this. Because, obviously for the last 6 months, primarily Stuart has been out of it. And I've been the one who's been trying to keep things going in church and school and everything else. And so it felt like, well, if the buck stops with me and I haven't, and there's some negative things that are happening, then it's my fault. It's me. And so I have walked this journey enough with myself to know that's a red flag. And so I stopped and I was like, what I'm feeling is shame. What I'm feeling is shame. And so I had to kind of stop and think about that and process it with God. I was able to stop and talk with God about how did he see me? How did he feel about me? And get his perspective back on my behaviour and the last 6 months. But can you imagine if instead what I'd done is react? If I'd started acting from that place of shame, then maybe I would have spoke dishonouring things about other people. Maybe I would have shown you the texts. Maybe I would have said, look what's happened. Maybe I would have justified me and my behaviour. And I could have caused hurt and harm to you guys, to other people, to the people who sent the texts. Instead, because I stopped and I asked him, what's your perspective on this? I was able to deal with my shame. And I was able to step back into that truth. Hey, people are doing the best. People are trying to do their best. That the decisions that people make, they're trying to do their best. They're not out to kind of hurt me. Shame stops us from being honouring. Because we can't be honouring when we feel a failure, when we feel not lovable, when we feel deeply flawed, when we feel we don't deserve connection. So one of the things that we need to do if we want to build a culture of honour is we want to deal with our shame. We actually sang about it. I thought it was really interesting that, one of Billy's taglines this morning when he was worshipping was about Yahweh and shame and bringing shame to the foot of Yahweh. And then in some of the words, John, you referenced shame, and I think you did as well, Joe. So it was interesting that it came up numerous times, and I was internally smiling and thinking, okay, God, you knew what you were doing this morning. We want to be a place that reflects the generosity of God, who is like that vineyard owner, who was generous to all the people who came and worked for him. We want to be a place that is known for go to celebrate, because they are so honouring. They celebrate other churches in the city. They love other people in the city. Let's be that place. But in order to be that place, then we have to be the people who deal with our shame. So, let's just spend a few moments now praying together. You might just want to kind of close your eyes, just forget about other people. And I want you to ask, Jesus, will you show me any area of my life where I'm feeling shame? Where I feel unlovable, unworthy, flawed, or unworthy of connection. And he might just highlight, we all have areas, because we're all growing. So let him highlight that to you. And then just ask, Jesus, when did I start to feel shame? And you might remember an incident that happened, or something from your childhood, or it might be more recent. But just let him show you. And just ask him, Jesus, who do I need to forgive? And there might be somebody that you need to forgive from your past. A teacher. A relationship that broke up. A mother or a father. And just forgive them, just quietly under your breath, just forgive them for how they made you feel ashamed. And then usually when we feel ashamed, we believe things about ourselves that are not true. Just ask Jesus, what lie have I believed about myself? And it might be that you're unworthy or unlovable. Just whatever that lie is, I just want you to give it to Jesus, to renounce it. I renounce the lie that I'm unlovable, unworthy, flawed, or unworthy of connection. And then just ask Jesus, what's the truth that you say over me? And just let him speak into that. And then just ask him, Jesus, am I ready to hand over my shame in this area? Am I ready to hand it over to you? And some of you will be ready. And then you just do that and say, Jesus, I give you my shame. What are you giving me instead? And some of you will not be ready. And that's okay. It just means there's some more to do. But Jesus always trades up. When we give him our rubbish, he always gives us something better back. And if you weren't ready to give up your shame, I would just encourage you to book a sozo to actually deal with that. And a sozo is just a session where we pray and we work through some of this stuff together. If you want to know more about that, then come and speak to myself or Joe, who was up here earlier, and we'd love to talk to you about that. I'm just going to pray for you now. Father, I thank you that you don't ever speak words of shame over us, but you deal with us with such generosity, such compassion. You are slow to anger. You are so kind. And Father God, in that area where we've felt shame, we ask you to come and speak your truth into it, because we don't want to carry that shame anymore. And we want to step into being a people of honour. Teach us, Jesus, how to release our shame to you, so that we can be a people who look at others and know that they're trying to do the best that they can, who treat other people with honour in the way that we speak, in the way that we listen. Amen. You might have questions after today. Nearly always when I speak, people have questions. That's fine. I'm more than happy to pray with you, to talk with you, to answer questions.